So recording happening and we are away. So thank you very, very much for joining me today. My name's Damian Rocks, as you probably know, and today we are going to talk about, I've called it Love in the Age of Aquarius. And what I mean by that is we're going to be talking about relationships, love, and how astrology can help you to get a handle on that, or what astrology has to offer you on that particular topic. So that's the main focus for us. I really want to talk, I want to share with you some broad ideas that can really help you to understand this aspect of your life, or perhaps to share with other people. We're not going to focus on the detail of individual charts because that is a little too difficult in this kind of a context. We're going to talk about the ideas, and I'm going to show you how astrology can help you to get clarity in this particular area. Okay, I'm going to take myself off the screen just to keep the stream nice and clear, and and we'll focus on the PowerPoint. All right, great. So, love in the age of Aquarius, relationships in your horoscope. So what's in it for you? So, what I want to do with you today is I want to share with you, I'm going to call them my 5 top tips for romance. Okay? And the most important idea I want to get across to you is that your horoscope is full of hope. I've been a full-time professional astrologer for nearly 15 years now, and I can't tell you how many times I've met people who are under the impression that there is something wrong with them, or that there's something in their chart that's preventing them from having a relationship, or that they may be fated to to misery all their lives, etc., etc. And this idea tends to get propagated by, let's say, bad astrology and superstition more than anything. And in actual fact, it's never the case. So your horoscope is full of hope, and what I mean by that is there is always a way to understand. What I mean by that is your chart allows you to understand yourself more fully. And when you have understanding, then you can find the meaning in whatever experiences are coming up for you. So of course, there are a massive range of experiences that we have when it comes to love and relationship, and understanding the meaning of those experiences is what it's all about. When you know the meaning, you can then decipher or decode what's happening, and if there's a pattern, you can look at changing it, and we'll talk about that as we go through. So over the next, say, 45 minutes, hour, however long we're spending together, I'm going to endeavor to unpack the following areas for you. And hopefully, if you've got any questions for me, there's only a few of us here, so we can talk and we'll have a conversation, and we'll see where we end up. So I'm going to be talking about the idea of knowing which sign is right for me. That's a question I get all the time. I get people sending me emails, getting in touch, wanting to know what sign should I be dating? Who should I be looking out for? So we're going to talk about that. We'll also be looking at what you should look for in a relationship. And that's something that I think astrology does particularly well. It's really good at giving clear information on what it is that you need. So I'm going to show you how to do that with your chart. So even if you don't really know anything about astrology, I'm going to give you some really simple tools to get a handle on what you should look for in relationship. I'm going to introduce you to a concept, and I don't know if you're familiar with this or not, but I'm going to introduce you to a concept which is called a composite chart. So this is another tool in the astrologer's toolkit, so to speak, and this helps us to understand why we change in relationships depending on who we're with. So I can imagine that we've all probably had the experience that different parts of you come out depending on who you're interacting with, whether that's that intimate one-to-one relationship, but even in a group of friends, or within the family dynamic, you see different parts of yourself and other people come to the table when we form relationships. So astrology also gives us a way to understand that. And we'll look at the idea of why we keep attracting the same experiences. So this is the idea of patterns, how patterns form in our lives, and what we can do about it. But I just want to reinforce again, this is all about you. The most important takeaway message, if you like, is that your horoscope is full of hope. There's so much information in there that can help you to find a satisfying relationship. So knowing where to look for that information is what I want to talk about today. So we're going to go through the top 5 tips. If you've got any questions, just feel free to jump in, okay? Because it's a nice small group, so we have that luxury. All right, top tip 1. There is no such thing as the best or right sign for you. I cannot emphasize this enough. The idea that I'm an Aquarius and I don't get along very well with a Virgo, or I shouldn't be with a Taurus or whatever it is, it's absolute rubbish, okay? I'll talk in more detail on the next slide about why it's absolute rubbish, but this idea we have to get rid of. But it's such a pervasive idea, and this is why I've put it as top tip number 1, because it's a total myth. So many of us are living under this myth that there's someone that we're best suited to, or that there's a sign that we should be attracted to, etc., etc., etc. It's just not true. What we need to look for is we need to look for someone who matches our temperament, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But this concept that there's a best or right sign for you generates a huge amount of misinformation, and that can confuse people. I have had so many people come to see me over the years who feel very confused or disempowered by the information they're reading out there, particularly online. There are unfortunately so many bad sources online that love to talk about this idea of, Leos should be with this person, and if you're a Scorpio, this is your best match. It's absolutely untrue. So I would invite you, and anybody that might be listening to this recording, I'd invite you to let that idea go from this moment on. Don't hold on to it. It's not true. It won't work. And if you keep thinking like that, the worst thing is you're going to miss out on the people who are actually good for you. If you've got that focus in your life of what's the right sign for me, you're going to possibly miss out on the good ones that go by. All right. Any comments about that? Do you guys want to say anything about that? No? Happy with that? All okay? All right. Let's go on. Number 2. So, I'm terrible at this. There we go. Top tip 2. Understanding your unique temperament is the key, the absolute key. Okay? So there's no one right person for you or one right sign. But what there is somebody who will match or blend with your temperament. So your nature, the word simpatico sums it up really well. So what you're simpatico with, what you align with, what you connect with. And that's never as simple as a sun sign. You cannot look at someone's sun sign and go, you're compatible with that. It's far too simplistic. To understand someone's temperament through the horoscope, you've got to look at the entire thing. You've got to bring it all together. You've got to connect the dots, because your temperament is if you like, it's the kind of the grand banquet that is you. Okay, so if we want to feast at the banquet, we don't go and pull out the flour and the eggs and just look at those bits. We wait for the whole thing to be put together, and then we enjoy it. So your unique temperament, or your personality, or who you are as described by the horoscope, it's never as simple as your sun sign or your moon sign or rising sign. And when we're meeting somebody new, it can be a real error to say, they're a Gemini. I don't think we're going to get along, so I'm not going to explore this relationship. That's a big mistake. Okay, we want to be open to the idea of finding individuals who align with us in terms of temperament. So this doesn't need to be difficult. This doesn't need to be a hard idea to grasp. And so I'm being very obvious, if you like. Today we're going to talk about Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, because, they're obviously topical lovers, okay, in 2018. And we're just going to talk about them. And I want to show you how these ideas work. So first of all, in terms of temperament, we can look at Prince Harry, or his makeup, his astrological makeup. And you don't need to be an astrologer to understand this. You may know nothing about astrology, but if you just stick to the basics, if you just look at a person's sun sign, moon sign, and rising sign, and bring those bits together, you're going to get a real feel for their temperament. And in terms of your own individual chart, if you can just think about blending your sun sign, moon sign, and rising sign together, you're going to be pretty much in the park in terms of what you need to. So thinking about temperament is key. So at a really simple level, broad strokes, we can look at Harry's chart. And one of the things that stands out straight away, because when you're trying to understand someone's temperament, you're looking for the big things. You're not looking for the minutiae. You're looking for the big, obvious thing, okay? G'day, CJ. Welcome to our conversation today. Nice to have you here. So, think in terms of Harry's chart, one of the things that stands out is he's got a lot of his sun, moon, and rising sign. So, sun sign, in case we're not sure, moon sign and rising sign are all earth signs. So this guy is a pretty earthy individual, which means he's practical. He's going to be focused on the nuts and bolts of reality. His concerns are going to be what he can hear, see, smell, touch, and taste. So very much the pragmatist in lots of ways. Another pretty big feature of Harry's chart is the fact his moon sits in this area, which we call the 5th house, and his sun sits in this area of the chart, which we call the 9th house. And that combination generally indicates a fairly easygoing, happy-go-lucky, fun kind of guy. Someone who has big ideas and someone who thinks what's possible in the world, but is also relaxed enough to know when to have fun. Now, I'm sure I'm not blowing you out of the water in describing him in this way. It's fairly obvious that that's who he is. But this is what I mean by temperament. It's the big, broad strokes in the chart which will give you an idea of who you are or who somebody else is. And another really big statement in Harry's chart is the fact that at this area, the top of the chart, Saturn sits next to what's called his midheaven. And when planets sit near or close to the midheaven or opposite the midheaven, they're going to also have a big impact on a person's story. Having Saturn at the top of his chart tells us that while on the one hand, he's easygoing, fun-loving, he's a bit of an adventurer and a risk-taker, on the other hand, he's also very serious. So this feature in his chart tells us when it comes down to it, he's going to be really concerned with presenting himself in the proper way. It's going to be really important for Harry to dot the I's and cross the T's and make sure he delivers in terms of his public responsibilities, reputation, and protocol. And this is very common for anybody who has Saturn sitting at the top of their chart or near their midheaven. Okay? So we might say some of those qualities that I described there, we could say this is his temperament. Okay? We can also I'm just going to draw your attention while we're on this slide. I'm going to draw your attention to this symbol up here, which is the position for Venus. In Harry's chart, Venus is the strongest planet in the chart. It has a big influence in his life story. And this tells us, and I'm going to explain in more detail soon, this tells us that he's also likely to look for a partner, or he'll be attracted to a partner who is also seen to be serious, focused, capable, who makes an impression on her environment, who's also very ascetic, who's ascetic or gracious, or who appeals to the public in a very strong way. You can see in Harry's chart that it's important for him to find somebody that fits that particular mold. This is his temperament. All right. Anyone want to say anything, any comments? You can just unmute yourself if you want to make a comment or ask a question about this chart before we go on. No, we're happy to proceed? All right, let's do it. So that brings us to, top tip 3. And this is something that you can apply to your own chart pretty much straight away. Where are Venus and Mars? Because when you're talking about relationship, you're looking at blending temperaments, or you're looking at finding someone who gives you what you need, okay? And a big piece of that puzzle will be described by the placement of Venus and Mars in the chart, because these planets represent the psychological principles of attraction, okay, but also action. So what we attract to ourselves, and then also what we seek, what we push for, what we go out into the world and strive to get. So it's the yin yang of relationship, if you like. It's the masculine and feminine dimensions of forming relationship. And it doesn't matter your gender, it doesn't matter your sexuality. Venus and Mars will talk about what you enjoy attracting to yourself, and we'll also talk about what fires you up. So I might use those words instead. Mars is descriptive of what fires you up, what gets your passion going, what gives you that kind of grunt feeling, if you know what I mean. And we all have that. We all have that. So Venus and Mars describe these aspects of our personality. So just going back up again to Harry's chart, as I said, Venus at the top of his chart in a strong position tells us that he will be attracted to a woman of style and substance. So it will be important for him to find a partner who is seen to be very beautiful, who's elegant, who's refined. These are all qualities of the sign of Libra. But Libra is also a sign of the intellect. So someone who is smart, someone who is seen as being just, someone who can act as a diplomat or a peacemaker. This will be important for him. He will be attracted to that. Okay? All right. So what can we learn when we look at Megan's chart? So let's think about Megan in terms of temperament, and let's think about her in terms of Mars and Venus. So first of all, in terms of temperament, her chart's very different from Harry's. Very, very different. And let's say a kind of a cookie cutter kind of astrological approach would put these two charts together and say, oh, these people don't match. They're not suited to each other. So a simplistic understanding of astrology would say, well, he's a Virgo and she's a Leo, so they're not going to get along. Total rubbish. Total rubbish. What we see when we look at Megan's chart, or the dominant features, are, of course, she's got her sun in the sign of Leo, and that sun's in the first house of the chart. So that brings a confident, expressive, dramatic, and creative tone to who she is. Someone who needs recognition and applause in this life, but also someone who is learning what it means to become a leader. That's an important part of her story. She's also got the moon in Libra, and we've already talked about how important it is for Harry to find a partner, I won't even use gender, to find a partner who has that quality of being refined but also intellectual. And so Megan has her moon in the sign of Libra, which tells us that she innately has those qualities. That's a part of who she is. It's part of her nature. It's a fabric of her being. And she's also got the moon, and she's also got Cancer rising. So not only does Megan have a Leo flavor and a Libran flavor, but she's also got a strong family ethic going on in her chart. There's a strong need for home, family, stability, and security. Remember earlier I talked about Harry's chart with Saturn sitting next to his midheaven and said that's a really important feature. When we look at Megan's chart, we look down at the bottom of her chart and we can see here a collection of planets opposite her midheaven, which is also really important. So she's got the moon, Saturn, and Jupiter opposite her midheaven. Now, this combination tells us that she's also, this reinforces what I've already said about that family value. It also reinforces what we know in terms of structure, stability, and discipline. So Saturn, in particular, is a planet which represents that need to do things properly and do them well. Harry's got it in his chart. Megan's got it in her chart. For Megan, it's got something to do with family and heritage. For Harry, it's got something to do with fulfilling his public role, doing what it is he's expected to do in whatever obviously we know his public role and what that is. So it's about doing his job well. But both of them carry that flavor. Okay. When we look at Venus and Mars in Megan's chart, we can see she has Venus in Virgo. So she's going to be attracted to somebody who has the qualities of the sign of Virgo, somebody who is practical, someone who's analytical, someone who's service-oriented. And lo and behold, we find Harry has the sun in Virgo. So there's a fit there, there's a connection. It's not the biggest connection, but it shows an affinity. It shows that their temperaments are starting to blend. When we look at Mars in her sign, what kind of fires her passion, she has an interesting position for Mars. Her Mars in the sign of Cancer talks about being drawn to a more sensitive individual, someone who's potentially much more private or creative or imaginative. And so this really makes me wonder about their private life in terms of obviously what we see is only a facade, and what happens on an intimate level between the two of them suggests to me that Harry's probably a lot softer than what we get the impression of from what we know of him publicly. Anyway, point being, we want to be looking at how the temperaments blend. So when you think about your chart, when you think about the challenges that you face in relationship, when you think about the question of what do I need to do to meet someone, or why does the same thing keep happening to me? What I want you to think about first and foremost is, well, what is your temperament? What is your nature? What is that saying? So thinking about, as I've said to you, blending your sun, moon, and rising sign, putting that all together. And then to get a feel for what your Venus, the placement of Venus and Mars in your chart, because that will tell you, that will reinforce what you're attracted to and what you need in terms of relationship. Because particularly for an intimate relationship, for love, okay, we need to have that magnetic quality. We need to have that kind of, that erotic spark. It's really important. So what gives me that feeling, that charge of attraction, but also that desire to go and get my partner? What is it? And Venus and Mars will tell you that. Okay. Any comments or questions? No, we're all okay? All right, beautiful, good. You're fantastic listeners, I've got to say. So, but don't be shy. It's very rare that you have the opportunity to, talk to someone like myself and ask whatever you want. So please don't be shy. All right. So what we've learned so far, top tips 1, 2, and 3. We've learned that there is no best or right sign for you. We've learned that your temperament is the key to what's right for you. And we've also learned that the placement of Venus and Mars in your chart will give you a lot of detail and information. But that's not all. Because if we're to look at Megan and Harry if we're to look at them, as I said before, as in a cookie cutter kind of a way, they're not fabulously matched to each other. They don't have there's not a strong pull here in terms of temperament. So that begs the question, what else is there? And I think that you will find in your own life, you definitely find in your own life and the lives of people that you know, sometimes people form relationships for reasons which aren't initially obvious to us, which don't necessarily hit us in the face. And the reason for that, I would say, has to do with what I want to call top tip 4, and that is that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. When two people come together and form a relationship, they're not isolated, they're not islands, isolated from each other and then somehow juxtaposed against each other. When we come into relationship, we bring our qualities to that relationship, we bring our energy to that relationship, and that creates a third dimension, or maybe let's even say a fourth dimension. It creates another dimension to the two of us. And this extra dimension is really important because it's what the relationship brings me that often keeps two people together. So you might want to reflect on this yourself. I mean, how many of us have been in situations where we find ourselves, wildly attracted to somebody, and we either pursue that attraction and find that it kind of goes nowhere after a little while. We might date for a month or two or whatever, but it kind of doesn't go anywhere. Or how many of us have been in a situation where, okay, it takes time to get to know someone, it takes time for you to click, but once you have clicked, you find that, I don't know, it's not what you expected, but it gives you more than what you thought you would have got from the outset, that kind of thing. So what brings that, how do we understand that? How can we explain that? Astrology does this really well by incorporating another tool, and this is something called a composite chart. So you may, I'm not sure if you've heard of this before or not, but basically what a composite chart does is it brings the charts of two individuals together and it overlays them, if you like, onto each other. It basically looks at the, how will I say this in a simple way? It looks at the way that two people's energy will be triggered when they come together. So how will you react when you and X come together? That's what the composite chart describes. And it's really interesting because while you may not know from looking at your partner's astrology chart, you may not know, oh, I don't really know why we connect, or you might meet someone new and you might think, oh, I don't have a lot to do with Aquarians, so I'm not really sure this is going to go anywhere. It's the composite chart which keeps the two of you together, and so looking at that is really useful. Now, if you're not an astrologer, it's probably a little bit tough to try and read a composite chart, but you can always give it a go because it's not as difficult as what it might seem when you know where to look. And if you want to, if there's someone in your life that you would like to look at how the two of you connect or relate, all you need to do is go to astro.com. And I've talked about this in my videos before, so I won't go over it again. If you go to astro.com, they have an option there for you to create the composite chart. And I recommend you do that. And it doesn't have to be with a lover. Do it with someone that you know well. It can be a sibling or a good friend or a workmate. Just look at your composite chart and see if that tells you anything about the way the two of you come together. So when we look at the composite chart for Harry and Meghan, it really starts to make sense. We really see the glue that binds these two together. So let me just draw, like I've said to you already, it's about big things. One of the the easiest ways to get lost with astrology is to focus on all the details. And I'm always teaching my students to forget the details and just look for the big broad strokes. Because when we understand the broad strokes well, everything else falls into place. So the broad strokes in this chart are really obvious, fairly clear. So I've mentioned to you already, whenever there's a planet opposite this point, this midheaven, or next to this midheaven, it's going to be important. So in this composite, which is the chart of Harry and Meghan joined together, we've got the moon sitting right down here. And in this case, the moon's in Cancer. So that tells us what the two of them coming together has a really big family connection. This is a very family-oriented chart. And what's even more fascinating is this area of the chart is to do with heritage. It's to do with roots. It's to do with the past and tradition. And so when I looked at the composite chart, because I only created this during the week, I thought, isn't it interesting? If, you may or may not be aware, but Meghan Markle also has royal heritage. In her ancestry, she has two members of the English royal family that she's distantly related to. And this composite chart shows that these two people, when they come together, it connects them back to their roots, back to their heritage. This is going to be important. There's something important here for the two of them in terms of continuing the lineage or the history of which they're both a part. So it's a very family orientation, and I think that will suit Harry's need for security and to do things properly. I think that will suit that part of him very well. Also really interesting is this area of the chart. So if you may or may not be aware, but the line that runs through the center of these charts shows the horizon line. And if planets are found near this line, it's also a really key position in the chart. And here we've got the symbol for the planet Uranus. So what this tells us is when these two people come together, they're going to change the paradigm. Their relationship challenges the dominant paradigm in some way. It makes people think about things differently. The two of them, just in the very act of coming together, will do things differently from other people. And that's so clear and so obvious because Megan's heritage and her story is so different from the norm in terms of the British royal family. So there's a real, not necessarily challenge to convention here, but there's definitely a quality of shaking up the status quo. And that's contained within their relationship. It's like they're destined to do this. If the two of them stay together, they will continuously challenge the status quo with how they go about doing things. Does that make sense to you? So this relationship, Meghan and Harry coming together, it's all about family, it's all about roots, it's all about heritage and giving each other what they want in terms of intimacy, sexuality, attraction, but it's also about challenging dominant norms, taking things forward, bringing things into the future. And I would say that that's probably what binds them in lots of ways rather than, you know, I'm a Virgo, she's a Leo, how do we connect, etc., etc., etc. So when you're thinking about your own life, your own relationships, and what you need, so either the people in your life or you're thinking about, if you're looking for a relationship and you're thinking about, well, you know, what's next for me, I really encourage you to explore the composite chart of the important relationships in your life because it will give you a much better understanding of why the two of you affect each other in the way that you do. All right. Top tip 5. Now, this is also really important. I can't tell you how many times I've had someone get in touch with me and say, in essence, people sometimes gain the idea that they're doomed, that there's no hope, that there's something wrong with them, that they can't seem to break a particular mold. And I always want to challenge that idea because if you notice a pattern in your life, so if you notice that you keep on attracting the same kind of individual, or if you notice that, you know, the partnerships that you form, the other person ends up losing interest and leaving you. If you notice that's going on, while on the one hand, of course, that's painful, it also means that you can change it. And this is another thing that astrology does brilliantly, is it helps you to see the patterns in your life and going back to where we started, to understand the meaning behind the pattern. So why is it that I keep on attracting alcoholics? Why is it that my partners lose interest and leave? Or conversely, why is it that I kind of get into a relationship and then I feel a little bit claustrophobic and I have to get out of it? Why does this keep happening? Now, if it happens once or twice, then it might be because of the composite. It might be because the energy between the two of you isn't what you want to experience in the long haul. But if it's a recurring theme, then it's a pattern. And if it's a pattern, you can change it. So this is something, as I've said, astrology does brilliantly. It helps us to understand those patterns and make the changes that can give us what we want in terms of relationship. So even if, you know, you're sitting here or you're listening to this at home, or you're sitting here today and you haven't been able to attract what you want in terms of relationship, when you know why, then you can do something about it. And there is absolutely nothing in your horoscope which says you are doomed to repeat the same thing over and over again. All your horoscope shows is where there are certain patterns or inclinations, and you always have free will in terms of changing or working with those. All right, cool. So don't give up, okay? There is always hope, and the hope is based on understanding. Understand your patterns, and you can do something about it. Okay, so temperament, first of all. So you guys have come here today obviously from the subscriber list. So you probably know this, but you may not, so I won't assume it. If you want to learn more about your temperament, so if you want to understand your sun sign, your moon sign, your rising sign, and blend them together, then I couldn't encourage you more to jump onto the website, hit the section called Your Astrology Profile, and you'll find a very comprehensive summary of your sun, moon, and rising sign. Blend them together and you'll understand yourself much better. Or when you meet someone new or you're thinking about forming a relationship with somebody, just find out their sun, moon, and rising sign, and then think about how that connects with you in terms of your temperament. Okay? The other thing you can do, of course, is get in touch. So if there are patterns going on, or if you would like to explore a composite chart with somebody, obviously, yes, you can do it online as a kind of a novice way, but there are a reason we have professional astrologers in the world, because we specialize in this kind of thing. So if you want to get in touch and organize a consultation, you can also jump onto the website, hit the consultation button, and connect with me that way. So to sum up, there are 5 top tips in terms of love and relationship as revealed through your astrology chart. There's no one sign that's right for you. Your temperament is really important. So when you understand it, you can attract to yourself what you need. Look at Venus and Mars, because they will give you some really good tips in terms of what it is that you want or desire. Realize that the composite chart, or the connection between the two of you, is greater than the two of you as individuals. So that will affect you and how things unfold. And lastly, if there's a pattern going on, you can change it. Good. All right. So brings me to the end of what I want to talk with you about. Here's our opportunity to have a bit of a question. So anything for me before we say goodbye? Robin, I can see you. Yep, go for it.
Hi, Damian. Thank you for that. Would you mind going back to the composite chart?
Not at all.
Of Meghan and Harry?
Yep.
I had a question about the 5th house.
Yep.
There's Saturn in the 5th house.
Yep.
Does that mean that the relationship is doomed to failure?
Okay. So it's a really good question, and the reason it's so good is because it's absolutely wrong.
Okay.
There is never anything in an astrology chart that says this is doomed to this is written in stone. It never is.
Okay.
And a lot of people claim that to be true, and I can tell you from thousands and thousands and thousands of charts that it's never the case. So that's the simple answer. The more complex answer, Saturn isn't actually in the 5th house.
Oh.
It's sitting on the edge of what we call the 6th house. When it comes to, this is where we're starting to get complicated. When it comes to the composite chart and the houses of the composite chart, there are different ways of finding the houses. So if you used a different method, so just for the people who are listening who will know what I'm talking about. So this is a composite chart based on the reference place. So this is set for London, and how this couple are affected when they're together in the UK in London. Okay? But there's another method called a reference point method, called a midpoint method, which would give a different result. So I never would read a composite chart in that way. Okay. What I would do though, do you have much astrology knowledge at all?
A little bit.
Okay.
Yes.
So what I would do is I would notice when that Saturn was transited. So when planets transit the composite chart, then you will get a much better sense. And this is going to happen for the two of them in about just under 2 years. As Saturn moves through Capricorn, And as it comes towards the end of the sign of Capricorn, it's going to cross their composite midheaven, and it will square their composite Saturn. So they're going to have a relationship challenge in 18 months to 2 years from now, and that will be defining for the two of them. So are they doomed or not? No one knows, but they will definitely have, they will definitely need to reinforce their commitment to each other at that point. And that may have something to do with the issue of children. As you've rightly brought up, the fifth house is associated with children and romance and, you know, the fun side of the relationship. So, yeah, that could be a tough time for them. We won't know.
Okay.
But the composite chart is really good for looking at the dynamic between the two of you and how it unfolds through time.
Okay. Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. And I was just wondering if maybe because Mars and Venus are also in fifth, like maybe those two would balance out Saturn's serious energy. Yeah,
definitely.
So,
Definitely. You're always going to have Saturn somewhere. This is what you've touched on, something which is important. The fact that Mars and Venus are together in the composite chart, that talks about a very, very high degree of passion,
right?
Compulsion. So even though they definitely are going to have a bit of a challenge come up, they also have this magnetic pull together. And in fact, I should have mentioned this when we talked about it. Even though when we look at their charts as individuals, we may not see a huge amount of attraction or connection, their composite chart has Venus and Mars together. So that's always going to mean that there's a real pull to each other. You know, so that's good. You want that. You want that in a marriage.
Yes. Yeah. But you don't necessarily want Saturn there.
No, but it will be somewhere. It'll be somewhere.
Right.
So, yeah, there's always going to be a challenge.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Anyone else got a comment or a question? No. Erica, I can't see you, but I did notice that you just sent me over an email. So I'll check that out after we jump off online. Eliza, yes, you have put... okay. You've also put, why is Venus in a strong position on the chat? Okay, really good question. Let's go back to that. So we're getting a bit of technical astrology at the same time. I like it. I do like to do things properly. So the reason I made the comment that his Venus is in a strong position, there's two reasons. One, Venus is in its own sign, or it's in the sign that it rules. So Venus is in the sign of Libra. This is its own sign. When a planet's in its own sign, that immediately gives it strength. Straight up. So Venus in the sign of Libra gives it strength, meaning its essential qualities, its nature, can come to the surface more easily. The other reason that I've said Venus is in a strong position is because it's right at the top of the chart. Right at the top of his chart, and it's making what we call a square aspect to his ascendant and also descendant. So it sort of sits pretty much equidistant between the eastern and the western horizon. And so that's a strong placement for a planet as well. So those two things, it's the strongest planet in his chart. It's the planet that has the most what we call accidental and essential dignity. Yeah. So for all of us, we're all going to have a planet which is the strongest in our chart, and that strongest planet will also be a big player. So there you are, Eliza. Sorry, I couldn't see you. It was just black. So there you are. Okay, great. Does that make sense, Eliza? Great. Perfect. Beautiful. Beautiful. So do you have any astrology knowledge, Eliza? Do you have a background in astrology, or are you studying it in any way? Hang on, I'll unmute you so you can just lie back, relax. It's very early in the morning for you. So
yeah. I'm studying it, on and off. I've been doing that for a couple of years.
Okay, great. So the answer is it has accidental dignity and essential dignity.
Yeah.
Cool, beautiful. It's the Lord of the chart. You could call it, the traditional term is the Lord of the geniture. Yeah. Beautiful. All right. Thank you, folks. Anything else before we say goodbye? Nope. All right. So thank you so much for joining me. I do like doing these little stars like you sessions. It's great to connect and meet you, and it's also great to share information, which also I like to do. So I'll yeah, so I hope you enjoy it. And for those of you who watch this later on, I hope you enjoy it as well. And if you've got any questions, you know where to find me. Have a lovely day. Yeah, I'll look forward. Maybe you'll see you in the next time around.
Thank you, Damian.
Pleasure. Thanks, folks. See ya. Bye.
Bye.